the quiet, sleepy town of Willow Creek, life moved at a slow and predictable pace. Nestled between rolling hills and dense woods, the town was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, or thought they did. The streets were lined with old brick buildings, small shops, and cozy homes that exuded charm. It was a peaceful existence for most. But for Maria, it was both a sanctuary and a cage. Maria lived alone in a modest little cottage on the edge of town. Her days followed a rhythm as steady as the ticking of her grandmother's antique clock. Every morning she would wake up early, brew herself a cup of tea, and sit by the window to watch the sunrise before heading to work. Maria worked as a seamstress, stitching together dresses, shirts, and quilts with meticulous care. People often praised her craftsmanship, marveling at how perfectly straight her seams were or how beautifully intricate her embroidery turned out. But while they admired her skill, few truly understood her as a person. To the townsfolk, Maria was something of an enigma. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, kept to herself, and avoided large gatherings like the plague. Some whispered that she must be shy or lonely, while others speculated that she simply preferred solitude. What no one realized, however, was that Maria wasn't just quiet. She was content. She found peace in the simplicity of her daily routine and joy in the small pleasures of life. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the street, the sound of birds chirping outside her window, and the soft hum of melodies she sang under her breath as she worked. Music had always been a part of Maria's life, though only in private moments. When she was a child, her mother used to sing lullabies to her, filling their tiny home with warmth and love. As she grew older, Maria discovered her own voice, a rich, soulful instrument that seemed to carry emotions words alone could never express. But singing was something she did only when she was completely alone. She'd belt out tunes while sewing, late into the night, harmonizing with the whirring of her sewing machine, or softly croon as she folded laundry. To her, these songs were like secrets shared only with the walls of her house. Despite her reserved nature, Maria wasn't entirely isolated. She had a handful of acquaintances who occasionally stopped by her shop to chat or pick up their orders. Mrs. Thompson, the baker, sometimes brought her leftover pastries, and Mr. Harris, the grocer, always greeted her warmly when she came in to buy supplies. Still, there was a distance between Maria and the rest of the town, a polite barrier she maintained without ever saying a word. Most people respected her boundaries, though some couldn't help but wonder what went on inside her head. Was she happy? Did she dream of adventure beyond Willow Creek? No one dared ask. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled through the air, the town buzzed with excitement about the upcoming Harvest Festival. This annual event was the highlight of the year in Willow Creek, drawing families from nearby villages and even a few tourists passing through. There would be pumpkin carving contests, hay rides, delicious food stalls, and, of course, the much-anticipated talent show. The festival was meant to bring the community closer together, celebrating the bounty of the season and showcasing the unique talents of its residents. This year, however, things were going to be different. In an effort to make the festival more inclusive and perhaps to boost attendance, the organizers decided to make participation mandatory for all adults in town. Everyone was required to contribute in some way, whether by volunteering at booths, entering the talent show, or helping set up decorations. At first, this news was met with mixed reactions. Some people embraced the idea, eager to showcase their skills or try something new. Others grumbled about being forced into activities they weren't interested in. For Maria, though, the announcement felt like a punch to the gut. When the list of participants for the talent show was posted outside the community center, Maria scanned it anxiously, hoping against hope that her name wouldn't appear. But there it was, written in neat block letters near the bottom. Maria Dawson. Her stomach sank. Performing in front of a crowd was her worst nightmare. Just thinking about standing on stage made her palms sweat and her heart race. She tried reasoning with the organizers, explaining that she didn't have any special talents to share, but they brushed off her concerns with cheerful reassurances. "It'll be fun," said Mrs. Peterson, one of the coordinators, patting Maria on the shoulder. "You don't have to do anything fancy, just pick a song or tell a story, something simple." Simple. That word stuck in Maria's mind long after the conversation ended. Simple. Easy. Harmless. To the organizers, it probably sounded reasonable. But to Maria, it felt like a trap. How could she possibly stand in front of hundreds of people and bear even a sliver of herself? The thought terrified her. What Maria didn't know yet was that her inclusion in the talent show had already sparked whispers among certain members of the community. A group of young adults, led by Sarah, the mayor's outspoken and somewhat mischievous daughter, had taken notice of her name on the list. To them, Maria's quiet demeanor and lack of social presence made her an easy target for teasing. They began plotting ways to turn her performance into a spectacle, not because they disliked her personally, but because they saw it as an opportunity for amusement. "We should get her to sing something ridiculous," Sarah suggested during a casual gathering at the local cafe. "Like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or one of those old nursery rhymes, can you imagine?" Her friends laughed, feeding into the idea. None of them stopped to consider how cruel it might be. To them, it was all in good fun, a harmless prank designed to lighten the mood of the festival. Surely Maria wouldn't take offense. After all, she barely spoke to anyone anyway. What harm could a little ribbing do? And so, as the days leading up to the festival ticked by, the stage was unknowingly set for a moment that would change Maria's life forever. Unaware of the plans brewing behind her back, Maria retreated further into herself, dreading the inevitable spotlight. Yet deep down, buried beneath layers of fear and uncertainty, a flicker of determination began to grow. If they wanted her to sing, then sing she would, but not in the way they expected. As the days leading up to the Harvest Festival grew shorter, excitement in Willow Creek reached a fever pitch. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of caramel apples and freshly baked pies. The townsfolk buzzed with anticipation, discussing their plans for the big event. Children practiced their pumpkin carving designs, while adults rehearsed acts for the talent show or finalized arrangements for food stalls. Everyone seemed caught up in the spirit of celebration, everyone except Maria. For Maria, the approaching festival loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. Each day felt heavier than the last, her anxiety building with every tick of the clock. She tried to focus on her work, stitching together garments with the same precision she always did, but her mind kept drifting back to the talent show. Thought of standing on stage, exposed and vulnerable, made her chest tighten. What would people think? Would they laugh at her? Mock her? She couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap she couldn't escape. Her fears weren't entirely unfounded. Unbeknownst to her, whispers about her performance had already begun circulating around town. Sarah, the mayor's daughter, had taken it upon herself to turn Maria's participation into a spectacle. Sarah wasn't a bad person, at least not intentionally, but she had a knack for stirring up trouble when boredom set in. She thrived on drama, always looking for ways to inject excitement into the monotony of small-town life. And this year, Maria's name on the talent show list presented the perfect opportunity. One afternoon, Sarah gathered her usual group of friends at the local cafe, a cozy spot known for its warm cinnamon rolls and steaming mugs of coffee. They sat huddled together at a corner table, giggling conspiratorially as they plotted their next move. "Did you hear?" Sarah said, leaning forward with a mischievous grin. "Maria Dawson is actually going to perform." Her friends exchanged amused glances. "Really?" one of them asked, raising an eyebrow. "What's she going to do? Stand there silently and stare at the crowd?" Sarah laughed, shaking her head. No, she's supposed to sing, can you believe it? Quiet little Maria singing in front of everyone." Her tone dripped with mockery, though she didn't mean any real harm. To her, Maria was just an easy target, a blank canvas onto which she could project her own idea of entertainment. "Well, what's she singing?" another friend chimed in, curiosity piqued. "That's the best part," Sarah replied, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "We're going to make sure it's something hilarious, something totally embarrassing, like Oh, I don't know, the itsy bitsy spider or Mary had a little lamb. Imagine how awkward that would be. The group erupted into laughter, picturing the scene in their minds. The idea of Maria fumbling through a childish rhyme on stage struck them as endlessly amusing. None of them stopped to consider how humiliating it might be for her. In their minds, it was all harmless fun, a way to liven up the festival and give the audience something to chuckle about. After all, who would take offense? Maria barely interacted with anyone in town. Surely she wouldn't care. Their plan came together quickly. Sarah decided to approach Maria under the guise of offering help. "Hey, I heard you're performing in the talent show," she said casually when she bumped into Maria outside the grocery store later that week. "That's awesome. Do you need any advice? I'm kind of an expert at this stuff." Maria hesitated, clutching her bag of groceries tightly. She wasn't sure whether to feel grateful or suspicious. No, thank you," she replied softly. "I'll figure it out." "Oh, come on," Sarah pressed, flashing a disarming smile. "It's not a big deal. Just pick something simple. You don't want to overthink it. How about a nursery rhyme? Those are always crowd pleasers." Maria blinked, unsure how to respond. A nursery rhyme? Was Sarah serious? Before she could say anything, Sarah waved goodbye and walked off, leaving Maria standing there with a sinking feeling in her stomach. It was clear now. This wasn't just about encouraging participation. It was about setting her up for ridicule. Word of Sarah's suggestion spread quickly among the townsfolk. Some people chuckled at the idea, imagining Maria awkwardly reciting a children's song on stage. Others shrugged it off, assuming it was all in good fun. No one stopped to question whether it was fair or kind to put someone so reserved in such an uncomfortable position. After all, Maria had never complained. She kept to herself, rarely voicing her opinions or asserting herself. To many, she seemed like the type of person who wouldn't fight back. But what they didn't realize was that beneath Maria's quiet exterior lay a strength they hadn't anticipated. As the festival drew nearer, Maria found herself wrestling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she wanted to disappear, to vanish into thin air and avoid the whole ordeal altogether. On the other hand, a spark of defiance began to ignite within her. Why should she let them dictate how she performed? Why should she allow them to reduce her to a punchline? Late one night, as she sat by her sewing machine finishing a dress, Maria's thoughts turned to the songs she used to sing in private. She remembered the melodies that brought her comfort, the ones that made her feel alive even when the world felt overwhelming. Slowly, an idea began to form in her mind. If they expected her to embarrass herself, then she would give them something they'd never forget, but not in the way they imagined. Still, doubt lingered. Could she really pull it off? What if her voice faltered under the pressure? What if the audience laughed anyway? These questions haunted her, keeping her awake long after the rest of the town had fallen asleep. But deep down, a quiet resolve took root. She wouldn't let fear control her. If they wanted her to sing, then sing she would, and she would do it on her terms. Meanwhile, Sarah and her friends continued their preparations, oblivious to the shift taking place within Maria. They envisioned a comedic moment that would have the audience rolling with laughter, cementing the festival as the most memorable one yet. What they failed to see was that their plan was about to backfire in spectacular fashion. For all their scheming, they had underestimated the power of a voice silenced for too long, and the courage it takes to finally let it soar. As the final days before the festival slipped away, tension simmered beneath the surface of Willow Creek. The townsfolk decorated the community center, strung lights across the square, and polished their performances. But behind the scenes, two forces were quietly colliding: the weight of expectations placed on Maria and the growing determination within her to rise above them. Unbeknownst to anyone, the stage was being set not just for a performance, but for a transformation that would leave an indelible mark on the town forever. The morning of the Harvest Festival dawned crisp and clear, with a pale golden sun casting long shadows across Willow Creek. The town square was alive with activity as vendors set up their stalls, children ran around clutching balloons, and volunteers strung colorful garlands between lampposts. Everywhere you looked, there was laughter, chatter, and the tantalizing aroma of roasted chestnuts and spiced cider wafting through the air. It was the kind of day that made people feel grateful for simple joys, except for Maria. Maria woke earlier than usual, her stomach knotted with dread. She had barely slept the night before, tossing and turning as her mind replayed every possible scenario for the talent show. What if she froze on stage? What if her voice cracked or trailed off into silence, and what if the audience laughed, not because they were charmed, but because they thought she was ridiculous? These thoughts swirled endlessly in her head like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. She dressed slowly, choosing a plain navy blue dress that matched her mood. There was no point in trying to stand out. She just wanted to blend into the background. As she pinned her hair neatly behind her ears, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and sighed. Her reflection showed a woman who seemed smaller than she really was, someone who shrank under the weight of expectations. But deep inside, something stirred. A tiny spark of defiance flickered in her eyes, though it was still overshadowed by fear. By mid-morning, the festival was in full swing. Families gathered around food stalls, sampling pumpkin pies and caramel apples while musicians played cheerful tunes on fiddles and guitars. Children squealed with delight as they chased each other through piles of hay, their laughter echoing off the buildings. At the far end of the square, a small stage had been erected, adorned with twinkling fairy lights and a banner reading Willow Creek Talent Show in bold letters. Maria avoided looking at it, instead finding solace in helping Mrs. Thompson stack trays of pastries at the bakery booth. "You'll do great," Mrs. Thompson said encouragingly as she noticed Maria's nervous glances toward the stage. "Just remember to breathe and have fun." Maria forced a smile but didn't respond. Fun wasn't exactly how she'd describe what awaited her later that evening. Still, she appreciated the kindness. It was more than she expected from most people in town. As the afternoon wore on, the crowd grew thicker and anticipation built for the main event. Parents corralled their kids, making sure they were seated comfortably in front of the stage. Teenagers lounged casually nearby, whispering jokes and snapping photos on their phones. Sarah and her friends stood near the back, exchanging smug grins as they speculated about Maria's performance. They were certain she'd stumble over whatever silly rhyme they'd pushed her into singing, and they couldn't wait to see the awkwardness unfold. Finally, the moment arrived. The MC, a jovial man named Mr. Jenkins, stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, and welcomed everyone to the talent show. He introduced the first few acts, a young boy playing the ukulele, a group of teenagers performing a choreographed dance routine, and an elderly couple reciting a humorous poem about farming mishaps. Each act received polite applause, but nothing extraordinary happened until Maria's name was called. "And now," Mr. Jenkins announced with a broad smile, "please give a warm welcome to our next performer, Maria Dawson." For a brief second, the world seemed to stop. Maria felt every eye in the audience turn toward her as she stepped hesitantly onto the stage. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. The spotlight blinded her, and the sea of faces below blurred together into a single intimidating mass. She clutched the piece of paper in her hand, the nursery rhyme Sarah had suggested, and took a shaky breath. But then, something remarkable happened. Instead of bowing to the pressure, Maria paused. She looked out at the crowd, her gaze sweeping over the curious expressions, the amused smiles, and the mocking glints in some eyes. In that instant, she realized two things. First, that these people didn't truly know her. They only saw the quiet seamstress who kept to herself. And second, that this was her chance to change that perception. With deliberate calm, Maria set the paper down on the edge of the stage and stepped closer to the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice carried a newfound steadiness when she spoke. "Thank you," she began softly, her words barely audible over the murmurs of the audience. "I was told to sing something simple, but I've decided to share something else instead." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Some leaned forward, intrigued, while others exchanged puzzled glances. Sarah raised an eyebrow, unsure what to make of this unexpected twist. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her courage, and then opened them again. When she began to sing, the effect was immediate and breathtaking. Her voice soared, rich and velvety, filling the air with an emotion that left no one untouched. She sang Ave Maria, a hauntingly beautiful melody that seemed to transcend time and space. Every note resonated deeply, wrapping itself around the hearts of those listening. The audience fell silent, their initial amusement melting away into awe. Even the children stopped squirming, captivated by the ethereal sound. Maria poured everything she had into the song, the years of solitude, the unspoken dreams, the quiet strength she'd always kept hidden. Her voice wasn't just music, it was a story, a confession, a declaration of her existence. For those few minutes, the entire town forgot about the festival, the chilly evening air, and even themselves. All that mattered was the voice rising above them, weaving its magic. When the final note faded into the night, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then, like a wave crashing against the shore, the crowd erupted into applause. People leapt to their feet, cheering and clapping wildly. Tears glistened in some eyes, while others simply stared in disbelief. No one, not even those who knew Maria best, had any idea she possessed such a gift. Sarah and her friends sat frozen, their smirks replaced by expressions of shock and guilt. They had expected awkwardness, embarrassment, maybe even a few chuckles. What they got was something far greater, a reminder of the power of vulnerability and authenticity. For the first time, they saw Maria not as a timid woman to mock, but as someone with depth and talent beyond their comprehension. Backstage after the performance, Maria found herself surrounded by well-wishers. People congratulated her, hugged her, and thanked her for sharing her voice. Some apologized for underestimating her, while others simply marveled at the beauty of her song. It was overwhelming, but also strangely liberating. For the first time in her life, Maria felt seen, not as a quiet seamstress, but as a person with a story worth hearing. Though the night was far from over, the atmosphere in Willow Creek had shifted. The festival continued, but the focus had changed. Conversations buzzed about Maria's performance, and whispers of admiration followed her wherever she went. The townsfolk, who had once dismissed her as unremarkable, now viewed her with newfound respect. And Maria, standing quietly amidst the chaos, realized something profound. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let your light shine, even when the world expects you to stay in the shadows. The applause that followed Maria's performance was unlike anything Willow Creek had ever experienced. It wasn't the polite clapping reserved for children's recitals or the scattered cheers given to amateur acts. It was a thunderous, heartfelt ovation that seemed to shake the very ground beneath the festival stage. People stood on their feet, whistling and shouting "Bravo" as tears streamed down their faces. Some even pressed their hands to their chests, overcome by the raw emotion Maria's voice had stirred within them. For several minutes, the noise didn't die down. It swelled instead, growing louder with each passing second. Maria stood frozen at the microphone, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she tried to process what had just happened. She hadn't planned for this reaction. All she'd wanted was to reclaim some dignity, to show the townsfolk that she wasn't the timid, laughable figure they assumed her to be. But now, faced with this overwhelming outpouring of admiration, she felt exposed in a way she hadn't anticipated. Her cheeks flushed, and she instinctively took a step back from the mic, unsure how to respond. "Thank you," she finally managed to say, her voice barely audible over the roar of the crowd. She offered a small, trembling smile before retreating, backstage where she leaned against the wall and let out a shaky breath. Her knees felt weak, and her mind raced as she replayed the moment in her head. Had she really done that? Had she truly silenced an entire town with just her voice? Back in the audience, Sarah sat motionless, her face pale and her lips parted in disbelief. The smug confidence she'd carried all day had vanished, replaced by a deep sense of guilt. She glanced at her friends, who looked equally stunned, then turned her attention back to the stage, now empty except for Mr. Jenkins trying to calm the cheering crowd. Sarah's mind replayed every snide comment she'd made about Maria, every cruel suggestion she'd whispered to her friends. How could she have been so wrong about someone? How could she not have seen the depth and strength hidden behind Maria's quiet exterior? Unable to sit still any longer, Sarah stood abruptly and pushed her way through the crowd, ignoring the protests of people jostled aside. Her heart pounded as she made her way toward the backstage area, where Maria was still leaning against the wall trying to steady herself. When Sarah appeared around the corner, Maria looked up, startled by the intrusion. I'm sorry," Sarah blurted out, her words tumbling over one another in her haste. I didn't know you could sing like that. We were just joking around, but it wasn't fair to you. I feel terrible." Maria studied Sarah's face, searching for sincerity. For a moment she said nothing, letting the weight of Sarah's apology hang in the air. Then slowly she nodded. "It's okay," she replied softly. "I understand why you thought it would be funny. But maybe next time, think about how someone else might feel before making jokes." Sarah swallowed hard, nodding vigorously. "You're right. I promise I'll do better. And I really am sorry. For everything." Her voice cracked slightly, and she blinked back tears. It was clear she meant every word. Maria offered her a faint smile, surprising even herself with her ability to forgive. "Thank you," she said simply. "That means a lot." As the night wore on, the atmosphere at the festival shifted noticeably. Word of Maria's performance spread quickly, and soon everyone, from the elderly couple selling hot cocoa to the teenagers dancing near the bonfire, was talking about it. People approached her throughout the evening, eager to express their admiration. Some shared personal stories about moments when music had touched their lives. Others simply thanked her for reminding them of its power. Even those who had initially dismissed her as unremarkable now greeted her with warmth and respect. One particularly memorable encounter came when Mrs. Peterson, one of the festival organizers, sought Maria out. Earlier, Mrs. Peterson had brushed off Maria's concerns about performing, assuring her it would be fun without considering how daunting it might feel for someone so introverted. Now standing before Maria with a sheepish expression, she extended a heartfelt apology. "I owe you an apology too," Mrs. Peterson admitted, wringing her hands nervously. "We should have listened when you said you weren't comfortable. Instead, we pushed you into something that must have been terrifying. I can't imagine how much courage it took for you to get up there tonight and to sing like that." Maria interrupted gently, placing a hand on Mrs. Peterson's arm. "It's all right," she said. "I'm glad I did it. Maybe it'll remind everyone, including me, that sometimes stepping outside your comfort zone is worth it." Mrs. Peterson smiled tearfully, squeezing Maria's hand before walking away. By the end of the evening, Maria had become the unexpected star of the Harvest Festival. People lingered long after the event ended, reluctant to leave the magic of her performance behind. As fireworks lit up the sky above Willow Creek, signaling the grand finale, Maria stood quietly on the sidelines, watching the colorful bursts reflect off the faces of her neighbors. She felt a strange mix of emotions: pride, gratitude, and even a hint of sadness. For years she had hidden her voice, fearing judgment or rejection. Now she realized, keeping it hidden had only held her back. The weeks following the festival brought subtle yet significant changes to life in Willow Creek. Maria's performance became the talk of the town, recounted endlessly in conversations, at the grocery store, the bakery, and the community center. People who had once overlooked her now went out of their way to acknowledge her presence, offering friendly greetings and genuine compliments. Strangers stopped by her sewing shop just to chat, and invitations poured in, from book clubs, church groups, and local events. Though Maria appreciated the newfound attention, she remained grounded, unwilling to let it inflate her ego or disrupt her peaceful routine. For Sarah and her friends, the experience served as a wake-up call. They began to reflect on their actions, not just toward Maria but toward others in the community. Slowly, they started making amends, reaching out to people they'd teased or dismissed in the past. Sarah, in particular, took it upon herself to volunteer more actively in town initiatives, using her influence to promote kindness rather than mischief. Over time, the group's reputation improved, and they earned back some of the trust they'd lost. Maria, meanwhile, found herself inspired by the courage she'd discovered that night. Singing in front of the entire town had been terrifying, yes, but it had also been liberating. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream bigger. Perhaps she could take vocal lessons, refine her technique, and explore opportunities beyond Willow Creek. Music had always been a private joy for her, but now she wondered if it could become something more, a way to connect with others, to inspire, and to heal. Encouraged by Mrs. Thompson, Maria decided to enroll in a nearby music class. At first, the idea intimidated her. She worried she wouldn't fit in or that her skills wouldn't measure up. But on her first day, she was greeted warmly by the instructor, a kind woman named Miss Clara, who immediately recognized Maria's potential. Under Miss Clara's guidance, Maria began to unlock new layers of her voice, learning techniques that added depth and nuance to her performances. She practiced tirelessly, often staying up late into the night to perfect a challenging piece. Each note she sang felt like a step toward reclaiming parts of herself she'd kept buried for far too long. Word of Maria's musical journey eventually reached the ears of other townsfolk, sparking interest in organizing more cultural events in Willow Creek. The success of the Harvest Festival talent show inspired plans for monthly concerts, poetry readings, and art exhibits, giving residents a platform to showcase their talents. Maria was invited to perform at several of these gatherings, and though the thought of singing publicly still made her nervous, she embraced each opportunity with grace and determination. Every performance was met with enthusiasm, further cementing her status as a beloved figure in the community. By the time the next Harvest Festival rolled around, Maria was no longer the reluctant participant forced onto the stage. This year, she volunteered to sing, choosing a powerful ballad that resonated deeply with her own journey of self-discovery. As she stepped onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause, not out of surprise but out of genuine affection and admiration. Maria smiled, feeling a sense of belonging she had never known before. In that moment, surrounded by the people of Willow Creek, she understood that her voice wasn't just hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated. And in sharing it, she had given them permission to shine too. The months that followed Maria's unforgettable performance at the Harvest Festival brought a transformation not only to her life, but also to the entire town of Willow Creek. What had started as a single act of courage on stage rippled outward, touching lives and reshaping relationships in ways no one could have anticipated. For Maria, the change was profound and irreversible. At first, she struggled to adjust to her newfound visibility. After years of living quietly on the fringes of society, she suddenly found herself at the center of attention. People stopped by her sewing shop more frequently, not just to pick up orders but to chat or share stories about how her singing had moved them. Some even asked if she'd consider teaching voice lessons, a suggestion that made her laugh nervously at first. Though she eventually warmed to the idea, it wasn't easy for Maria to navigate this shift. She often worried about losing the peace and solitude she cherished so deeply. But over time, she realized that connection didn't have to mean chaos. There was beauty in being seen and heard, in knowing that her presence mattered to others. One of the most surprising changes came from Sarah and her group of friends. Though their initial prank had been cruel, they proved themselves capable of growth and redemption. Sarah, in particular, took it upon herself to make amends, not just with Maria, but with the wider community. She became actively involved in organizing events and volunteering, channeling her energy into positive contributions rather than mischief. When the town decided to host a series of monthly concerts inspired by Maria's success, Sarah played a key role in planning and promoting them. Her efforts were met with cautious approval at first, but as she continued to demonstrate genuine remorse and commitment, people began to trust her again. For Maria, seeing Sarah's transformation was both heartwarming and humbling. She knew all too well how difficult it could be to confront one's flaws and work toward change. The fact that Sarah had done so openly, without defensiveness or excuses, earned Maria's respect. Their relationship evolved from awkward apologies to something resembling friendship. They weren't close. Maria still preferred her quiet evenings, alone, but there was mutual understanding and appreciation between them. Sometimes after a concert or community event, Sarah would approach Maria with a shy smile and say, "You're amazing, you know that?" And Maria, who once would have brushed off such praise, now accepted it with quiet gratitude. As winter settled over Willow Creek, blanketing the town in a soft layer of snow, Maria threw herself into her music studies with renewed passion. Miss Clara, her vocal coach, pushed her to explore new styles and techniques, challenging her to step outside her comfort zone. At first, Maria hesitated. Classical pieces like Ave Maria had always felt safe because they allowed her to hide behind their timeless beauty. But when Miss Clara introduced her to folk songs and contemporary ballads, Maria discovered a different kind of freedom. These songs spoke directly to the soul, telling stories of love, loss, and resilience. Singing them required vulnerability, but it also gave her a chance to connect with audiences on a deeper level. Her hard work paid off during the annual winter solstice celebration, an intimate gathering held in the town hall. This time, Maria chose to perform a hauntingly beautiful folk song about finding light in darkness. As she sang, her voice filled the candlelit room, weaving through the shadows and casting a spell over everyone present. When she finished, the audience sat in stunned silence for several moments before erupting into applause. Tears glistened in many eyes, including those of Mrs. Thompson, who hugged Maria tightly afterward. "You've given us all a gift," she whispered. "Never. Stop sharing your voice." Encouraged by the response, Maria began performing more frequently, at weddings, church services, and local fundraisers. Each appearance bolstered her confidence, helping her shed the lingering fear of judgment that had once held her back. She also started mentoring young singers in the community, offering guidance and encouragement to those who dreamed of performing but lacked the courage to try. Watching these students grow reminded Maria of her own journey and reinforced the importance of lifting others up. Meanwhile, the town itself underwent a subtle yet significant shift. Inspired by Maria's example, residents began embracing creativity and self-expression in ways they never had before. The monthly concerts became a beloved tradition, drawing crowds from neighboring towns and fostering a sense of pride in Willow Creek's cultural revival. Artists displayed their paintings in the community center. Poets read their work aloud in coffee shops, and musicians jammed together in impromptu street performances. Even those who didn't consider themselves artistic joined in the spirit of celebration, volunteering their time or simply showing up to support their neighbors. Maria's influence extended beyond the arts. Her story served as a reminder of the power of authenticity and the importance of treating others with kindness and respect. Conversations around town took on a warmer tone, with fewer harsh judgments and more empathy. People began looking out for one another, checking in on neighbors who seemed lonely or struggling. Small acts of generosity, like leaving homemade pies on doorsteps or offering rides to the grocery store, became commonplace. In a way, Maria's voice had awakened something dormant within the community, a collective desire to connect and care for one another. By spring, the changes were undeniable. The town square buzzed with activity as preparations began for the next harvest festival. This year, Maria was approached early on to help organize the talent show. Though she initially declined, citing her busy schedule, she eventually agreed to serve as a mentor for nervous performers. "If I can help someone else find their courage," she told Mrs. Peterson, "then it'll be worth it." Her involvement sparked excitement among participants, many of whom sought her advice on song choices and stage presence. One young boy, barely 10 years old, confided in Maria that he was terrified of messing up his piano piece. She knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It's okay to be scared," she said softly. "But remember this. When you're up there, it's not about perfection. It's about sharing a part of yourself with the world. That's what makes it special." On the night of the festival, Maria stood backstage watching as performers took turns dazzling the audience. She smiled proudly as the boy she'd coached delivered a heartfelt rendition of his favorite tune, earning thunderous applause. When her own turn came, she stepped onto the stage with a calmness she hadn't felt the previous year. This time she sang a soaring anthem about breaking free from fear, a message that resonated deeply with everyone in attendance. As the final note faded, the crowd rose to its feet, cheering and clapping until their hands hurt. Afterward, as fireworks lit up the sky and laughter echoed through the streets, Maria reflected on how far she'd come. A year ago, she had dreaded this very moment, fearing ridicule and rejection. Now she stood surrounded by friends, admirers, and fellow dreamers, basking in the warmth of acceptance and love. Her journey hadn't been easy. It had required courage, vulnerability, and countless leaps of faith. But it had led her to a place of belonging she'd never imagined possible. In that moment, under the glittering canopy of stars, Maria realized something important. Her voice wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated. And in sharing it, she had given them permission to shine too. The years that followed Maria's rise from obscurity to becoming a beloved figure in Willow Creek were marked by growth, transformation, and an enduring sense of purpose. What had begun as a single act of defiance on the Harvest Festival stage blossomed into a journey of self-discovery that not only changed her life but also left an indelible mark on the town she called home. Maria continued to nurture her passion for music, pouring hours into practice and learning new techniques under Miss Clara's guidance. Her voice grew stronger, richer, and more versatile with each passing month. She experimented with different genres, folk songs, classical arias, jazz standards, and found joy in exploring the vast emotional landscape of music. It wasn't just about performing anymore, it was about storytelling, connecting, and giving voice to emotions that words alone could never fully capture. Her growing confidence allowed her to take bold steps outside her comfort zone. When a regional choir invited her to audition for a soloist position, Maria hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to step beyond the familiar boundaries of Willow Creek. But with encouragement from Mrs. Thompson and Miss Clara, she decided to give it a try. To her astonishment, she earned the role, joining a group of talented singers who traveled across neighboring counties for performances. These experiences opened doors she'd never dreamed possible, introducing her to new audiences and expanding her understanding of what music could achieve. Yet, despite her newfound opportunities, Maria remained deeply rooted in Willow Creek. No matter how far her travels took her, she always returned to the quiet charm of her hometown, where people greeted her with smiles and genuine affection. The townsfolk, once content to overlook her, now celebrated her achievements as though they were their own. They cheered when she performed at local events, attended fundraisers she organized, and eagerly awaited updates about her latest projects. In turn, Maria made sure to give back, using her platform to support causes close to her heart, whether it was raising money for the library or mentoring young musicians. One of her proudest accomplishments came when she founded a community choir called Harmony in the Hills. The idea had been simmering in her mind for months, a way to bring people together through music and create something beautiful from their shared voices. At first, she worried no one would join, fearing rejection or failure. But when she announced the initiative during a town meeting, dozens of residents signed up immediately. From teenagers eager to learn to retirees looking for a creative outlet, the choir became a melting pot of ages, backgrounds, and skill levels. Together, they practiced tirelessly, preparing for their debut performance at the following year's Harvest Festival. The night of the choir's first public appearance was magical. Dressed in matching scarves stitched lovingly by Maria herself, the group took to the stage with nervous excitement. As Maria stood at the center, leading them through a medley of uplifting songs, the crowd erupted into applause after every number. By the end of the set, tears streamed down many faces, including Maria's, as the final harmonies faded into the crisp autumn air. For the first time, she felt truly surrounded by family, a patchwork of individuals united by their love of music and community. As the years passed, Maria's influence continued to ripple outward, inspiring others to embrace their talents and pursue their dreams. Young singers who had once doubted themselves blossomed under her mentorship, going on to perform in competitions and even earn scholarships to study music professionally. Adults who had long abandoned hobbies rediscovered their passions, whether it was painting, writing, or playing instruments. Even those who didn't consider themselves artistic found ways to contribute, volunteering their time or simply showing up to support their neighbors' endeavors. Willow Creek transformed into a vibrant hub of creativity, its spirit buoyed by Maria's unwavering belief in the power of connection. Sarah, too, underwent a remarkable evolution. Once known for her mischief and teasing, she matured into a compassionate leader within the community. Her involvement in organizing events and fostering goodwill earned her respect and admiration, proving that change was always possible with effort and sincerity. Though she and Maria never became close friends, their bond remained strong, a testament to the healing power of forgiveness and mutual respect. On the anniversary of Maria's first performance, Sarah approached her with a heartfelt letter, expressing gratitude for the lessons she had learned. "You taught me that kindness matters," Sarah wrote, "and that everyone has a story worth hearing." For Maria, these moments of recognition reinforced her belief in the importance of staying true to oneself. She often reflected on the shy, uncertain woman she had been before stepping onto that stage years ago, the woman who feared judgment and hid her light out of fear. Now, standing tall amidst cheers and applause, she understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear but the decision to move forward despite it. Every song she sang, every student she mentored, and every smile she exchanged with a neighbor reminded her of this truth. When the next decade rolled around, bringing with it changes, both expected and unforeseen, Maria found herself at peace. She still lived in her modest cottage on the edge of town, though it now housed shelves lined with awards and mementos from her musical journey. Her sewing shop remained open, though she worked fewer hours now, allowing younger artisans to take over much of the workload. And while her performances became less frequent, they carried even greater weight, each note imbued with the wisdom of experience and the depth of lived emotion. On her 60th birthday, the town threw her a surprise celebration in the square. Friends, family, former students, and admirers gathered to honor the woman who had touched so many lives. Speeches were given, memories shared, and laughter echoed through the evening air. As a tribute, the Harmony in the Hills Choir performed a special arrangement of Ave Maria, the very song that had launched Maria's journey all those years ago. When the final note hung suspended in the twilight, the entire crowd rose to their feet, applauding not just for the performance, but for everything Maria represented: resilience, authenticity, and the courage to let your light shine. That night, as Maria stood surrounded by loved ones, she realized something profound. Her journey hadn't been about fame or accolades. It had been about connection. Through her voice, she had bridged gaps between strangers, healed wounds, and inspired countless others to find their own strength. And in doing so, she had discovered a deeper sense of belonging, not just within the town of Willow Creek, but within herself. In the end, Maria's story wasn't just hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt unseen, unheard, or underestimated. It was a reminder that our voices, whether literal or metaphorical, have the power to transform not only our own lives, but also the world around us. All we need is the courage to let them be heard.